Together, developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it'll help us get our show to others and help us get to our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire TV on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content going deeper within on the Lions Guide Academy. And today we are speaking with Sharne Fairbrother. Sharne is a fractional chief people officer, and she helps organizations unlock leadership potential, build aligned cultures, and create people functions that are future ready. And I love that. Sharne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege.
Well, I am excited to have you on the show, excited about the topic that we're talking about. And folks, we will be speaking about unlocking leadership potential through ontology. Tell us a little bit about you before we get into that conversation.
So I am joining you from, feels like halfway around the world. I'm based in New Zealand, and the work side of me, I work across New Zealand and Australia, as you said, as a fractional chief people officer. So for people that don't know what fractional is all about, it's supporting usually small to medium-sized businesses who need senior levels of capability, but not full-time. And so being able to come in, be embedded inside of a business, but operating in a very focused, kind of time-bound way is something that I love doing. And then I also work as a culture and leadership consultant, kind of in one-off initiatives or projects with other businesses. My background is in the people and culture space. I've spent my whole career there across all different facets of that business function, if you like, and have transitioned, particularly in the last 5 years, to be focusing more on supporting startups, scale-ups, while I still do some work with larger businesses too. For me, outside of work, so privilege of being here in New Zealand, we have a little piece of land where we tend to run a kind of couple of cattle. It's a great green space for my two small children to adventure in. I'm a big rugby fan. Go the All Blacks. They're playing up in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment for their end of year tour. So that's currently seeing me have some 4 a.m. wake up calls to watch the games live for time differences here down in New Zealand.
Quite a dedication to do that, but I know it well. When our teams go abroad, we also make some of those sacrifices to catch them play and potentially win. But you're in a great environment. You're in a great position as a chief people officer, something that is near and dear to my heart, the people. And we both are leadership developers, people developer. So, Sharne, many leaders may not be familiar with the term ontology in the context of leadership. Could you explain what ontological leadership means and how understanding the way of being shapes how we lead others?
So I think, as you've pointed to, ontology is all about the study of being. So taking a look at who and how we are being and how that informs how we show up in the world of work, but also in other areas of our life too. I think the thing that I love to talk about with leaders is it's important that we build awareness that what's going on inside and in our inner world really is the thing that shows, that informs how we show up. And so, we're walking through our world of work, our roles as leaders, informed, with our behaviors informed by our moods and our beliefs and our identities and, what's going on inside our body too, and the interpretations of the context and the circumstances that we're experiencing, go through all of those lenses, if you like, to then show up in our behaviors and actions. I think so often as leaders, and particularly in the realm of leadership development, we take this kind of a very outside-in approach and focus on, okay, what are the circumstances and the context that I'm going to have to deal with, and what are the actions and behaviors that are going to be the right match for that. An ontological approach is taking an inside-out approach and going, what's going on inside here? Who am I and how am I being, and how is that going to enable me to best respond through those behaviors and decisions to the context and circumstances?
And as a leader, as a person, that is so important to address in your lifetime. I have said this before as I have dealt in the ontological model, all the ways of being, and have looked at myself. It is a very eye opening experience to understand that you cannot fix things just by merely repositioning them outside. Your habits will come up, your tendencies will come up. Those things that you don't even know are there will come up if you just approach it as, let me just set this up, the stage, as if you will, just so that I don't mess up. And we end up being our greatest enemy, as we say sometimes. But because we have that approach. So thank you for sharing that. Now, organizations often focus on what leaders do, their strategies, actions, and results. And so, how can shifting the focus to who leaders are being create deeper, more sustainable change in our organization's culture?
Yeah, I think great question, because you and I will both see, as you've pointed to, perhaps the false sense of security that organizations get from taking this very behavior-led, very logical and rational approach to leadership development. Like, surely this must make sense and is what's going to transform our leaders. And again, you and I have both seen that not to be the case, that giving more frameworks, more KPIs, more tactics of how to have a difficult conversation, they're just adding more things to leaders' already full to-do list, and are very much at the mercy of, when things get busy, when the pressure comes on, you're not going to be remembering to do more of that doing. So being able to go inward, tackle the being aspect of it, and think about, in the context of you're having difficult conversations, for example, if you haven't had a look at where your relationship with fear might be in terms of your relationships with people, where your relationship with courage is sitting, your ability to be vulnerable, none of the tools and tactics around having better difficult conversations are gonna really hit home and help you in that moment where you're eyeball to eyeball across the table from someone in that challenging circumstance. So getting underneath, getting to the root cause, I suppose, of what's driving your behaviors, your decisions, how you're showing up, really is where transformation can actually happen, rather than trying to, as I said, tackle it outside in.
Yeah, and I love that you said false sense of security, because that's what it is when you rely on things that just look superficial or are superficial. When the rubber hits the road, the reality of who you are will show up. And so that is why I like the term false sense, because at that moment is when you're going to get reality. And often doesn't match your plan A, right? So great comments there. Now, you help organizations build cultures that are both aligned and future ready. I love that, because we do have to have a future ready posture. But how does an ontological approach help teams adapt to change, stay aligned with purpose, and prepare for the evolving demands of the workplace?
I mean, something that I've been thinking about a lot is that intersection of what ontology gives us when it comes to being future ready. I think the way, the world of work, but also just the world generally, as it's evolving at the moment, is it's, I think, again, the kind of false sense that we can keep up with the change. I think we really have to let go of the grasping for that and think more about, okay, what are the foundational ways of being which are going to enable me to be adaptable in the face of goodness knows what, the number of things that we've experienced and had to respond to in the last, say, 5 years are things that we haven't had playbooks for. And so we have to become comfortable with the uncomfort surrounding, I have to back myself to respond in the face of unexpected context shifts. And so understanding who you are at that level of being, what some of those things are that are driving the show when the pressure comes on, building awareness such that you can deliberately focus on shifting your relationship with some of those things is actually what's going to enable you to be adaptable and responsive rather than just trying to react and solve new problems with old patterns. I think also when it comes to alignment, again, we've all had the experience of leaders, not passing the sniff test, if you like, saying one thing, but showing up in quite a different way, and the confusion that can generate in an organization. Confusion is probably the best case scenario, outcome in that example. Being able to connect with your ways of being, think about how that aligns with your organization strategy. If your strategy is a hugely bold play for your organization, again, if you haven't looked at as a leader, how comfortable am I with my relationship with vulnerability, with my relationship with courage, with my relationship with commitment and responsibility, then it's going to be very tricky for you to show up as an aligned leader in that context. And again, we love to think that we're great at pulling the wool over people's eyes. We just generally aren't as humans. People can see where that misalignment internally exists, even if they can't quite articulate it or put their finger on why something feels a bit off. They sense it, and that drives behavior and culture through the rest of the organization too. So hugely important from my perspective, from an alignment perspective. Call them skills, that's the common kind of terminology that's being used at the moment. The skills that it takes to be a future ready leader, empathy, resilience, curiosity is a massive one, accountability and ownership. They're actually all ways of being first and foremost. Yes, we can, it's really important that we don't relate to them as fixed. They're absolutely things that can be shifted and we can grow in. We have to start by doing that awareness work first for ourselves. And again, not kid ourselves that we can just add tactical tools to our toolkit and that will be sufficient to stand us in good stead as leaders going forward.
Yeah, that's very powerful perspective in terms of, folks, we cannot fake our way through leadership or life. There
Yeah.
may be opportunities where you could, for a moment or maybe a small snippet of time, perform or display, right? This act, and maybe get away with it because you don't have longevity. But if you're in any position that's long enough for people to do the sniff test, it'd be like, yeah, that person is not what they say they are. because their actions obviously don't match that, or they have an internal conflict that goes beyond their capability of leading us. It'll always come up. So you can't hide. And that's just it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I always say to my clients that as a leader, everything you do and everything you don't do is always being watched, and it always is creating culture, alignment, or lack thereof. So that's the deal with leadership, whether you like it, whether you kind of like it or not.
absolutely. Now, what practical steps can organizations take to embed ontological principles
Mm.
into their leadership development programs so that leadership potential is unlocked at every level and not just the top?
I think a couple of things. As I've talked about, again, kind of running that um, assessment, if you like, a lens across your current leadership development efforts, activities, and going, what direction are we trying to play here? Are we going outside in, trying to stay at the tactics and tools level and thinking that that will be sufficient? Or is there any element where we're asking people to really go inside themselves and think about those more foundational ways of being, and then translate that into how that shows up in the world? A simple way, I suppose, of doing that, I always say, is if you don't think that vulnerability is a big requirement for your leaders in participating in your leadership development efforts, then for sure you're not playing at the ontological level. Like, vulnerability is the cost to playing the ontological growth game, I think. I think being able to build just a simple language around some of these ontological concepts, distinctions, ways of looking at the world can be a really useful part of developing leaders inside of organizations. Being able to have in some senses, it could be even a really short conversation about, hey, if we think about something like responsibility in an ontological way, this is kind of how this is what that would mean. This is what the definition of responsibility would be if we were looking through the ontological lens. Like, what does that mean to you? How does that make you think differently about the way that you show up, or the way that you've thought about responsibility in the past? That common language, so that you can then, in the moment, have have a shortcut to some deeper conversations, I think, with your leaders, can be really powerful, and can have a bigger impact than perhaps the small thing that it seems to be. I mean, you and I have, met through the Ingenesis being profile community, and so I was lucky enough to have exposure to ontological leadership development very early in my career, probably going back, 16, 17 years. And when I decided to go out to start my own business, I was really looking for tools and frameworks that were going to enable me to bring that ontological lens into the work that I was doing, in a more structured way, and in a way that would shortcut awareness progress for individuals and teams. And so the Being Profile is a tool that I'm a huge fan of, and again, in a very cost-effective way, enables individuals, teams, organizations to create that common language, get a really good sense of actually where are we at individually and collectively at the moment with our ways of being. And then, I always like then bringing in the organizational context and saying, okay, well, given your strategy, what matter? There's lots of distinctions inside the Being Profile, but which ones do we think matter most right now for us, given what we're up against and given the journey that we're embarking on? And being able to use that as a foundation, I've found to be really powerful.
Powerful indeed. Any organization that dives into the ways of being personally and collectively is bound to succeed beyond their wildest dreams. Now,
Agree.
caveat that, things may change worldwide. It may not, right? But in all things being perfect, an organization that approaches not only their daily living, but their corporate living, their collective living from that lens is just, I think they're just not ready for the amount of benefit that will come, but we'll be glad to see it come for them. So great comments there. In your experience, what are the biggest mindset shifts? And you spoke about shifts before. The mindset shifts leaders need to make to truly integrate ontology into their leadership practice, and what impact have you seen when they do?
I think a couple stand out in particular for me. First of all, as we've alluded to through this whole conversation, letting go of the mindset of knowledge and technical capability being enough, I think is really important. For sure, I acknowledge that often, leaders have found themselves in the positions that they're in because of their knowledge and technical competence. And especially in this day and age in 2025, like that the ability to generate and draw power and effectiveness from that, in my mind, the clock is, the clock is done on that. With all of the advancements in technology and AI, the only thing really that you can rely on to be effective in your role as a leader and actually effective in life generally is who you are at your core and how willing you are to continue to do the work, to build the awareness, to take a look at your ways of being and think about how that's going to help you show up in the world. So first of all, the mindset of we can just play at the technical competence level and that will be fine needs to go. Goes without saying, but I will say it. The secondary part to that is the mindset of really embracing that self-work is not optional when it comes to leadership effectiveness. You have to be willing to go there. I think the other mindset is there's two others that I want to speak to. One is around leadership being a head up kind of activity. So funny that we're talking about the word mindset in this context. What I've found is to really embrace an ontological approach to your own leadership development. You have to stop pretending that everything that matters only happens in this part of your body, like being able to take a more embodied approach to how you're showing up as a leader, to think about, okay, in those circumstances where I feel like I'm not being effective, what's actually going on in the rest of my body, and what clues might that give me into perhaps some of the ways of being that are being triggered, or where I might have less healthy relationships with aspects that I could grow some awareness on and work on. The last one that I would say is the mindset that we've talked a little bit about vulnerability so far in this conversation. And I think, again, we're still having a lot of people in the world of work who think that vulnerability doesn't have a place in the workplace, that their job as a leader is to be confident, to be very certain, to be sure, and generate that, decisive clarity. So my response to that would be yes, and again, I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that that's our path to effectiveness. How can we be confident and totally certain when we don't know what's coming around the corner anymore in this world? And so instead, being able to embrace the vulnerability of, you know what, I'm not going to be able to rely on just the things that I've done in my past work experience to have me be successful going forward. I'm going to face new and uncertain situations. And my job as a leader in that is to be really curious, to be honest with people that sometimes I won't know all the answers right away. But for sure, I back myself to be able to work collaboratively and together we can figure it out. I think having confidence and certainty in your ability to co-create is quite different to having confidence and certainty in, having the playbook for everything that's going to come at you. And so that mindset around what it takes to be an effective leader and the role that vulnerability has to play in that, in my view, is also an important one, I think, to bring and for some people to shift.
That is absolutely true. And I have seen it play out where leaders that shy away from allowing vulnerability to have a place have a harder time not only convincing themselves, but convincing their people that they are capable of leading, even in hard times. Because when you don't see someone that comes and says, let's say, hey, team, we have a deadline, but I'm having this challenge today. I need your help around this so that we can get there. If you can help me, that would make it a whole lot better for me to be able to think straight and maybe make some hard decisions. Or, but I need that help. It's probably one of the more conversations that we would love to hear that says not that you're weak at any moment, but that you need us. That, I mean, we have something that you need, and we're going to work on this together, versus, hey, I got all the answers when you really don't, and you can't tell me nothing because I know more than you, and you really don't, right? So it's this play on the false sense of I have it when you don't, is really a challenge for a lot of leaders. But it would be nice to see vulnerability take a front stage, the true vulnerability, right? Because you could be vulnerable for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I found that out about myself. So it's like I said, ontology has a great uh, place in the workforce and in the community. And if we embraced it sooner and more often, we would see great strides from everyone. Now, Sharne, what do you have coming up, and where can the viewer or the listener follow or support you?
Yeah, I'm really excited heading into 2026. Can't believe we're saying that. To be working more across Australia as well as New Zealand. People can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find by virtue of you and I can share this, not having the most common name. So I think I'm the only Sharne Fairbrother on LinkedIn. And yeah, I try and post that's my kind of thinking out loud space, I suppose, the things that are top of mind for me that are coming up in my work with organizations. And, I share on there to hopefully provoke a little bit of conversation and perhaps some insights for others too.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you, Sharne. And folks, we will have all the links necessary for you to follow, connect, and support all that she has coming up. Yeah, we're not over in New Zealand, but I know I'm looking for a trip over there. But we wish you all the best over there. And I know that your line of work is so vital for folks, for them to be able to succeed. So I know you will do well. Folks, today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, the Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. Tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.